Hey, everybody, just a quick reminder about these masterclass series with our guest is that, well, first and foremost, I just want to be completely transparent and clear with you. These are sponsored episodes. So what that means is, the guest he has mentioned in the past one is launching a course in which the topics that we are talking about today on the show are also covered in the course. And because of that, and because of this is sponsorship, if you decide that you want to go ahead and purchase the course, you can go ahead into our link, go to the site and do so. And upon doing which, IGM would receive an affiliate commission. That said, I also want to let you know there is a discount for a limited time, exclusive only to you guys, that's applied when clicking on that link. But also, we are not just straight up pitching the course on the show. We mentioned in the beginning, we mentioned it at the end, and then the whole time we are super focused and dialed in really deep on the subject for today. So I just want to be straightforward, upfront, and transparent. These are sponsored, but it's not going to change the value. There's no obligation. We just want you to be here, have a good time, and learn. So again, thanks for being such great listeners. Now let's get to the show. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Masterclass series on indie game movement, where we're going to be talking about game-changing monetization strategies. So in this episode, we're going to focus on developing effective and innovative monetization strategies without compromising the player experience. Our guest shares their philosophy on balancing revenue generation with player satisfaction and provides insights into creative approaches to monetization. So we'll also discuss common pitfalls, trends to watch, and how to refine monetization models over time based on player feedback. So if you're seeking actionable advice on building sustainable revenue streams while keeping players happy, you won't want to miss this discussion. So that's what we're going to be talking about right here today on Indie Game Movement. Hey, everybody, and we're back again with Patrick Rose. Patrick, how are you doing today, buddy?
I'm doing great, and I'm happy to be back. Thank you for inviting me again.
Yes, of course. And, why wouldn't you be, right? Because we're doing this masterclass series on how to create irresistible games. And this is the final part essentially of our deep dive into this, where today, as I said in the intro, folks, we're going to be talking about game-changing monetization strategies. So important, and there's so many things that we can dive into, which is, what we're here to do today. So before we get into that, quickly, just in case anybody's joining us for the first time, Patrick, brief introduction about yourself, and we'll go from there.
Okay, sure. So I am working for the games industry for over a decade now. I started as a games researcher, deconstructing games, understanding what makes games successful. And today we're going to speak about monetization mainly. So I also did a deep dive into monetization systems of all kind. How do premium games make money? How do free-to-play and mobile games or browser games or service games on PC and consoles, how do these games make money? And I was always really intrigued how complex these monetization systems are. This is basically the rocket science of free-to-play monetization, if you want to. So these monetization systems, right? So I always digged deeply into these things from the get-go, from the beginning of my career, and then later worked for big companies like Bandai Namco, worked on multi-million-dollar titles, a lot of big brands among them, like Elden Ring, like Tekken, these type of games. I also love to work on the Dragon Ball brand, for example, great fan since childhood. And for the past couple of years, I'm being a freelance consultant now, and I'm supporting all types of studios all around the planet. So I see a lot of different projects and products, and it's really, really interesting to work with all these diverse products from all around the globe. And I love sharing my knowledge with the community, which I try to do a lot for free, but sometimes I also take some coin for it. Allow me to do that. And that's my life in the games industry so far.
Yeah, no, it's a lots of great insights there. I'm sure, from your experience from working with those companies and now, being able to share it with, others, especially, this community, this indie community and such. So, and you mentioned too about doing things for free or scaling just to, share this knowledge as much as possible. And, one of the ways you're doing this too, and part of the reason why we're doing this masterclass series is because you're currently launching a course, correct? That dives into this and the other topics that we discussed during the masterclass. So, because again, if we can better scale these things and help more people out, great. And these deep dives are necessary. They really are. Whether we're talking about it here or taking things a bit further in the course that you provide, which is available, folks, in the show notes. But otherwise, yeah, thank you for the introduction. And I'm curious, man. I really want to get into this topic because this is something that I work in with myself a little bit, but I mean it's really expansive. I'm sure it's case by case. And as you said in earlier episodes, we really want to kind of focus on kind of the broad, not so much anecdotes of things, and that's what your course does too, from what I remember correctly, is focusing on those perspectives, so that way you or whoever listening can dial in deep in your own case, taking information that can be applied like with fundamentals, principles, core aspects that really let you do these things. So I'm going to stop talking because I know I could go on forever. So let's kick off. And on this whole concept of monetization strategies. I mean, they're important. We need to dial in as much as we can, folks. So it's tricky though. It can be very tricky balancing, between generating revenue, keeping players happy. I mean, we talked about in the past ones about engagement. So Patrick, what's your philosophy when it comes to designing monetization strategies that benefit both the players and developers? Because I know that could be a huge balancing act.
Right, exactly. And that is absolutely not easy. And also what is fairness and so on, that is so subjective. What feels fair eventually? Something people always like to pay for. I mean, think about it yourself. What kind of things you like to pay for? We like to pay for someone who can solve our problems. This is something we usually don't mind. So if you have monetization systems that are built around the solving problems, that is something people are very willing to pay for. However, in order to have problems to be solved, we need to design these kind of problems, which is the interesting part, right? It's not so easy to design a problem into your game that somehow bothers people. Problems are supposed to bother people, and then they would pay for it to solve these problems.
Yeah.
And yeah, it sounds like counterproductive, right? I mean, you want to make a fun game, but you're supposed to design some problems there. But then on the other hand, games are, I would argue, almost always about solving problems anyways. Overcoming challenges, becoming better at things, beating the other player team, for example. This is all like problems to solve, right? There's challenges to overcome. And if we just monetize there a little bit, that already has big impact. And I do understand, for example, we're stepping into pay-to-win territory there. But what I'm also trying to do with my course is, and I know not everyone likes to hear that, but I want to open people's minds about pay-to-win a little bit. It's not entirely a bad thing. In fact, a lot of the most monetizing games out there have technically pay-to-win monetization systems integrated. But people don't really realize these kind of things, and they still enjoy playing these type of games. They are not considered pay to win necessarily, but technically, objectively, they are often pay to win. And this kind of balance is really, really difficult to figure out and design. And this is what I usually help my clients with. And well, there's a lot of different strategies. I don't even really know where to start, honestly, but one important strategy I often focus on, again, it's not the only strategy, but one I like to focus on is increasing monetization surface area. That sounds really funny. I understand that, but it basically means like a sponge. A sponge has a lot of surface area, right? All these tunnels and holes of the sponge. And what can a sponge do because of that surface area? Well, it can suck water in and can like keep it in. And we have to create a game like a sponge, a monetization, a money sponge, basically. So that there are like these holes where the money can go in and then it sticks there somewhere. We need a lot of docking stations, basically, for the money. So we increase the surface area, and then therefore it's not like that one weapon people have to pay like $5 for in order to win the next match. But instead, the weapon, you can win it somewhere in the game. And to get it faster, a little bit faster, just put a little bit monetization here, a little bit there, maybe with different currencies. So it doesn't feel unfair, that it doesn't feel like pay to win, even though technically it is, because you could get it faster and maybe win the next match with it. But nobody realizes that. And eventually people can do a lot of stuff. It feels like a lot of value because they can do so much with the currency they just have purchased. So this is a design philosophy or a design technique you can use. Again, it's not the only one, but one of the design philosophies I use to make a game feel fair despite having and making use of the powerful method of pay to win eventually. There's a few other techniques. I don't want to like talk about all of them right now, but we talked in the past sessions I talked a lot about the self-determination theory, human intrinsic motivation, 3 factors, autonomy, relatedness, competence. I teach in my course how to build monetization around these 3 factors. So we actually help people to satisfy the intrinsic motivation, which they don't get in their normal lives, by making purchases in a game. So they will become more happy. They will actually feel fun by making a purchase. And this is another much more complex technique to create powerful monetization systems that feel good for everyone. That was a really long answer, I guess.
No, that's okay. You know what? I'm going to say quick that I like that you let in with the whole, pay to play, because, hey, we say that, I'm sure some people, there's the stigma and everything else associated, and understandably so.
Sorry, you mean pay to win, right?
Yeah, sorry. Pay to win. My apologies.
Yeah.
But there's, these connotations associated with it. And I think that in itself is just the example of why it can be very difficult to balance. Because if it's not balanced correctly, it could just simply come off of, oh, they're greedy, they're exploiting people. It's like all these other factors. And well, that's the intention or not, it still comes off as such. So I think it's great that you let in with that. And then as you started talking about the other things, especially as you were referring back to some of the previous conversations of the series, it starts getting into essentially alignment, right? Alignment with the monetization and the player experience, the player engagement. And you gave some quick examples with just now, but I want to kind of dive into that more, because that sounds like where it's at, where it gets tricky and balancing, but also understanding what that alignment is and how it's shaped. So when it comes to monetization, I would think that many developers worry about crossing and potentially alienating their players with how they structure their strategy. So in your experience, what are some of like the key factors for creating monetization model that feels fair and engaging to players? Because I think that's where we're getting into the tricky part with balancing things.
Yeah. And I like that you say what feels fair, because the thing we need to focus on is feeling. And a feeling is not objective. Even maybe something is entirely not fair. And a lot of things in this world are not fair. And we often still believe it's fair. For example, let's just talk about the premium games. Premium games, monetization is obviously also important for premium games. I talked a lot about free-to-play and service games now, but premium games also need monetization. That is usually the initial price point and the price points of the DLCs after that, or maybe you have another way of monetizing them. Maybe you have an episodic format, another business model, all these kind of things. I also talk about these things in my course, monetization and analyzing, making a benchmark analysis, for example, for the perfect price point, how these things work. So premium games are also part of my course here. Want to mention that. So, however, what is fair? Is it fair that we these days pay $70 for a AAA premium game? Well, me coming from Germany, Central Europe, we have like a a stable economy and everything, I say like, yeah, that sounds pretty fair to me. That's fine. I also have a good job, so I can easily pay that. A lot of people on this planet will not think that is fair. They will think that that's way too much for like an entertainment product. I mean, I can feed my whole family for that money for like a month or something like this. These places exist, right? For them, this is not fair. What is fair for them is that they can have a lot of fun with a free-to-play game without having to pay for it ever. And maybe at some point there will be that moment where the free-to-play game would ask for some money. And maybe this is where they would stop playing eventually, but they already had like hours of fun with that game. To them, maybe this is more fair. So what is fair is really, really subjective, and we need to design the right thing for the right audience. And on many occasions, I believe these days especially, a lot of free-to-play games, take Fortnite, is much fairer than your $70 or $40 Concord product, for example, right? So we have these situations as well. Fairness is subjective. We need to understand what is considered as fair by our specific audience. We need to use, well, psychological factors to make it feel fair. What I mentioned before, the surface area thing, when you increase the surface area so you can use the currency, the proxy currency you purchase within the game for a lot of different things in the game. That gives it value. That makes it at least feel more fair because I can do so many things with it. Maybe I can even now lay out my strategy. Should I invest this proxy currency here or over there? Strategizing pays into the autonomy factor of intrinsic motivation, pays into the competence factor of intrinsic motivation. That is fun eventually. And if I have fun with my purchases and I have this strategic additional value in that game, that will feel fair to me. And that is what we need to understand. It doesn't objectively need to be fair. It needs to feel fair. That's a subjective thing.
I
And
love
that's
that.
what I help.
Yeah, no, I
Go
was just
ahead.
going to say, I love that you call that out because I think sometimes we look at the objective fairness of it. So let's say for a premium game, for example, we're like, okay, and this is where I think people can sometimes fall in the trap of is, okay, for this game, because of this, and you know what, I guess we're going to only price it 15, $10. And let's say they might not look at what fair is, or another way is what is, I think another way to potentially describe this is the, perceived value. And if they don't fully understand all those intrinsic elements and understanding these psychological characteristics and stuff, that perceived value doesn't hold as much weight in that case. So therefore we're looking at things not as subjectively in that manner, but we're looking at them more objectively. Okay, $10, $15, that's great. And let's say overall though, in terms of you're hitting all those marks right in terms of the player engagement and everything. And let's say that overall perceived value, however it's being monetized, um, you know, really is and warrants, let's say, a $25 price point or even higher. I mean, these are all difficult things I think we're faced with, and sometimes we come across in selling ourselves short, which that's why I love how you were calling out to those things is especially like what is the idea or concept, and well, it's a little subjective and takes some time to wrap our heads on what is that feeling of fair, what is that perceived value, because it can really make all the difference and well, everything that you do with your game, that you do with your product. So I love that you called out to that. Now, and with that in mind, like keeping these things into consideration, I'm also curious about like the approach with it, right? Because let's face it, sometimes monetization can come off as just very transactional. It is a very transactional thing, anyways. So, what are maybe some, you know, creative approaches to this? Because I know that most successful games they introduce innovative ways to monetize beyond traditional models. I think one classic one, if I can remember this well, it was a mobile game. I think it was Alto's Descent, if I remember correctly. I could be wrong in that naming that title, but specifically, it was kind of a runner game where you're just going down a hill, avoiding obstacles, and upon crashing, I think they had some ads that would pop up that went in line with the gameplay mechanic in terms of rewarding you for, hey, you crash and you could watch an ad or something like that. Still, it's somewhat, a little bit abrasive, some friction there, but it actually was in line with the gameplay. It aligned with the experience, what made it all the difference for that game. And I think that's why I recall it, because there's other people calling out to the same things. So, anyways, that's just something in from my perspective. But hey, Patrick, in your experience, what would you say, are ways to approach finding creative monetization opportunities without compromising the game experience? Because at the end of the day, that's what we want to do. We don't want to interrupt that experience for players.
Yeah, right. I love that you use that advertisement in games example. This just points out that there's so many different ways to monetize a game. I talk about as many as I can in my course, a little bit at least, by the way, advertisements in game, like rewarded ads, for example. That in your case, this is a so-called rewarded ad. That I talk a little bit about that in the course as well. So, and then there's also interstitials, right, for games, which are the really annoying ones, which come up like every few seconds. They don't really have a benefit for the game. It's just like there all the time. And then again, you create that problem there. You create that problem there, and then you have that button which makes you remove all these ads, right? And this is also monetized again. Or that one you could now tie into a VIP system, for example, a VIP subscription. Maybe there's not that one button that will remove the ads forever, but instead you have to like subscribe and pay like $3 per week or something for your little mobile game, so that you don't see any ads and have a few other benefits to it too. So that you can like make this really complex, but this complexity is needed for really powerful monetization. When I say powerful monetization, I'm talking about games that make at least $100,000 per day. I don't even look at other games. I only research the games that make at least $100,000 per day, or even better, $1 million, $5 million per day. These are the interesting titles for me. And they usually have really complex monetization systems, which are difficult to understand. This is why I teach these things. However, so what I did in my games, I did some hyper casual, hybrid casual with my tiny research studio as well. So, and in these games, I added rewarded ads to summons. So it was not like you die, now you get an extra life in order to keep running, but instead, during the gameplay, there will be some powerful summons. Imagine like in Final Fantasy, the summons, you can call them and they will make a cool, huge attack with cool animations. Well, we didn't have that budget, but it was still like a little special thing. Sometimes there was a summon ability like popping up. You already saw this little monster there, which you could now summon if you just push the button and then you agree watching the ad. After the ad, the summon will do its attack and it will like remove all the enemies. So it's really gamified. In a clicker game, I did it like it was a toilet paper clicker. I'm not sure if I can say that word now, but during that phase where we had like a little pandemic going on. And when that happened, we had that toilet paper clicker because in Europe, apparently everyone was running out of toilet paper. So we all like wanted toilet paper, right? I kind of monetized on that. And so in that clicker game, like a cookie clicker, basically, there were sometimes golden toilet paper rolls coming down. And if you clicked them, if you caught them, like it was, you needed some skill to actually catch them. You were allowed to watch an ad and get millions of additional toilet paper rolls for that because you made it, right? It was your skill which made that. And then you want to watch the ad eventually because it's that. If you don't watch it, it will just like keep flying away. It's these kind of things where you can put a lot of creativity and game design into these things and make them even a little bit fun.
Yeah, I'll say real quick too. I love that example because what I led with in that one, at least for that mobile one, it was, if we think about it, like what's going on here? Hey, there is something negative that happened in the gameplay experience. And now the negative aspect, and I'm not saying that, the creators of this game did anything wrong or whatever, but this is a negative impact in the game, negative experience. And now you're giving them reward. So maybe intrinsically, as players, we are, associating a negative event in the game with an ad. And if they're looking to monetize that could have a negative impact on their monetization. Whereas what you propose no, do the opposite. You're fulfilled, they have accomplished something, And because of that, now they have the ad. So this is the positive associating with the ad, where it's more likely than not, almost as a sense of reward, and more likely for players to keep them engaged because there's that like positive feedback as opposed to a negative one. So I love how you called out to that. One other thing I'm curious too, because I know we talked a little bit like, so at least strategies or concepts and ideas here that were relating to mobile. What about, let's say, in the premium landscape in terms of like monetization? Like, does this differ at all? Is not so much in game, where it can be like live ops, of course, could be more in game, but let's say externally, whether it's like DLC or, what other things can we look at from, just creative approaches to monetization and premium type products?
Right, right. So premium monetization is much less complex, and it's much more about marketing on the sales side and so on. So the initial price point, as I mentioned before, and for this, in order to set the right price point and also have a good like life cycle management over the, like when I say life cycle, I usually mean like 1 or 2 years, depending on the company. They each all see it a little bit different, but I usually refer to like 24 months or 2 years of a life cycle, and you want to always adjust your pricing to get the most out of it, right? If you set it too high, people will purchase less, meaning less sales. If you set it too low, you will miss out on money. So you want to nail it all the time over the entire life cycle. I teach in my course about how you can do that. What is a proper benchmark analysis? And well, at least I'm giving these starting points, and I'm also like rising some red flags. And that is some of these things you already mentioned: DLCs, episodic formats, meaning like Telltale games, for example, episode 1, episode 2, episode 3. Telltale had a lot of issues with that, and we also know that it didn't end really good for them. We didn't really know the reason. I know the reason as an analyst. They had the issue with the attach rate. And we need to know these things before we set the monetization strategy, right? The sales strategy in this case. If we know about the attach rate, episode 2 will sell much less than episode 1, because only from 100% of the people who purchase episode 1, only like 60% will purchase episode 2, and so on. If you make like 3, 4, 5 episodes, it is just not profitable anymore. So this is like, this all pay is basically the monetization part with premium games. And then you have to think about, do we want to make it a service game or not? How do we monetize the service part? So this is where the complexity comes in. And in fact, I'm not sure if all the studios got that by now, and all the big publishers as well, but this is where all the rocket science comes in that we also have in free-to-play games. Premium service game monetization, no matter if AAA or indie game or whatever, is basically exactly the same like free-to-play mobile or browser game monetization. It's the same patterns, it's the same things, and it took the big publishers out there, Ubisoft, EA, you name it, it took them many, many years to understand this. And it's when the mobile games, free-to-play mobile games, already made millions, 10 years later, this is where like a company like these I just mentioned, when they finally started understanding these type of monetization systems, because they have not been looking at browser and mobile games early enough, at free-to-play games. That was a big issue. But then if you have a game like this, premium service game, just apply the same psychology, the same knowledge, the same systems we see in successful free-to-play games on mobile. It's gonna work if you can translate it well with your type of game, right? With your type of gameplay. That is the other thing, the implementation.
Yeah, no, definitely. I mean, implementations is everything. And, just to go back real quick, when you were talking about the premium games too, I mean, I love how, because I don't think a lot of people think about this too, in terms of, hey, what is the shelf life of this product, in terms of like how long to like maybe support it and things like that. And in addition to that support, I mean, there's strategies too. I mean, we've all heard about in terms of like discounts, what that means. But like you said, initially nailing that price is important. You got to hit that sweet spot, but we also have to be mindful of margins. I mean, Steam or whatever other platform is going to take a cut. There's if you're doing a rev share with people, that's going to take a cut too. So those are all factors you got to consider, because revenue, it's not the bottom line. It's your net. And those are important factors. If you're looking for other ways to, let's say, market, let's say you want to use paid ads, for example. Okay, now that cuts into your margin too. So at the end of the day, if you're charging $10, there's not much left for you, and it doesn't mean you can't use that price. It just means, just what I'm saying is be mindful of those margins. Because like you're saying, it can dictate and mean everything in terms how your game, is commercially successful or not. So all crazy stuff, but we got to be in tune with it. So, with some of the things you were just sharing, though, Patrick, I'm also curious too. Like, what would you say are some maybe the most common mistakes or misconceptions that you see, developers make? Because I'm sure all of us listening today would love to do everything possible within our means to avoid those pitfalls.
Right. For premium games, it's definitely choosing the wrong price point. I said that already. Too low, you miss out on money. Too high, nobody will buy it. So pretty straightforward. That is a very, very, very big pitfall, and you have to understand how to analyze the market properly. You have to understand what is the right price point for you. For free-to-play and service games, things are even more complex. I would say shying back from pay-to-win. People hate me for saying that, but shying back from pay-to-win is a mistake. At least be open, understand it before you just say that you just don't want to hear about that at all, because this is all unfair, dark patterns stuff. That is not true. Again, a lot of games which are a lot of fun to a lot of people out there, which are not considered as pay to win by the audience, are technically pay to win, and they make huge amounts of money. And you don't want to miss out on that just because of this kind of philosophy, which is, on the other hand, a good philosophy if it comes to marketing, just telling everyone, we don't want to have anything to do with pay to win. As soon as it feels pay to win, we don't want to do it. That's a good thing. It's a good philosophy in marketing. But from the monetization viewpoint, we need to talk. We need to think about it a little bit more dry and more like objective. That's really, really important. Another thing, almost all of the studios are still missing out on a lot, is not focusing on intrinsic motivation. The 3 factors of self-determination theory: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. For example, let me just give you one example. Battle passes. And in our last session, we had that little exercise, right? How can you use these 3 factors to enhance a jumping feature, right?
Yep.
You might remember that one. And you can do the same exercise with each of your monetization features, or even with your sales packages in your in-game store. Add the relatedness factor to a battle pass. That's an exercise I love to do with my clients or with my mentees. If relatedness battle pass, what does it mean? Make it social, make it more social. How can this impact, how can the battle pass have impact on the social gameplay? Maybe you have a social battle pass together with your clan, with your alliance. You have to pay into a battle pass or fight for this kind of social battle pass, which you also have to maybe activate together as an alliance. And the alliance leader, the clan leader, can activate it if that clan leader has enough resources, which that clan leader only has if all players play together, win the next 100 matches or so to have enough points to activate that battle pass, and then they all fight together to get it. That is a huge factor. And now when you add monetization to it, like if you pay a little bit into that battle pass, everyone will progress faster. Nobody will mind that type of monetization. It doesn't feel unfair because you just only do something for the group. Everyone will love it when you are a pay user. So these kind of things, how to add these 3 factors, that was only one factor I talked about, but adding these 3 factors to your monetization systems, people miss out on this, and this is a huge pitfall, actually. That it's absolutely missing out, and people think we are already, there is not much more we can do these days. We are already using all the techniques. It's not true. We can still innovate so much. And yeah, so people should not shy back from these things, and they should understand the psychology. These are some of the main mistakes I'm seeing there when I talk to studios.
Yeah, and it's so interesting to hear, because these setbacks are apparently, it sounds like, kind of a lack of understanding of the players, of people, like those core pillars that you've mentioned that we've discussed a lot in the previous episode. And so instead of looking at things as, oh, well, I know how players feel about that, and everybody's experience is going to be different. And then there's nothing to say that your feelings or understanding of those situations are invalid or wrong. But when you're getting to a deeper level and taking different approaches and how to be creative, because it's out of an understanding of these, core attributes, these core elements, and how just people, everyday people operate, then it allows you to look at things a little differently, look at things a little bit creatively. Now, I just mentioned a moment there about, oh, I understand and know what players are, saying, right? And of course we do, whether we receive it in our own feedback or we see, some press coverage or article coverage about players and outrage about something or whatever. Players are super vocal today. And, especially in what they feel that has value, and especially the stuff that they find off-putting. So, how do you recommend then, developers listen and act on player feedback? Because let's face it, if people are upset about these things, maybe it could be something where all of a sudden we're like, oh, I guess that's it. I'm not going to go with it. Like, are there other underlying things in player feedback that we can take and learn in a different way? Because, players, as much as we love them, they're not always the best people to communicate their experience and everything else that they love or don't love about an experience.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. You were saying it already. That is a big issue. And I say a lot of counterintuitive things today, or things that sound counterintuitive at least. So people don't know what they want. People don't know how they will act in a game when they are actually eventually getting what they asked for. We see this so much. You do what the people want, and they still don't play the game more, or maybe even less sometimes. So of course, people want to have all the problems solved. But again, as I said before already, if all the problems are solved, nobody will pay. Nobody has challenges to overcome. Nobody will play. So don't give them just what they want. So basically, one of my former bosses, he was a really smart guy. He always said, when people hit a wall, then don't take away the wall. Sell them a letter. So that is the thing. People will say, we don't want that wall. Give them the letter. So, and I think something really important here is data. Metrics. Metrics usually have all that information from thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of players all at once, and it comes in so easily if you have the right data backend. That one is really important to look at. Look at your KPIs, your key performance indicators, and look at these things first. Then also listen to feedback. I'm not saying just ignore that. This is also important, but it helps you to interpret that feedback. It helps you to see, for example, yes, they say that one thing, but apparently they act in a very different way in the game. I have that one big example when I was working for Good Games Studios many years ago, free-to-play mobile game company, really successful. They have that mobile game, Empire for Kingdoms. And I remember when all the players were so annoyed by the pay-to-win system in the game that they, as a community, decided to strike one entire weekend. They said, we're not going to play, we're not going to pay, especially. Maybe we're going to play, but we're definitely, all of us, we're not going to pay. That weekend, up to that day, was the most profitable weekend of all times for that game. Even though the community was so vocal about the fact that they're not going to pay. That opened my mind. That opened my eyes, right? That it's so important. Feedback, yes, it's nice and good to have, but don't lose your way because of too many loud voices there. Look at your data first, understand that first, understand user behavior, understand psychology, then listen a little bit and try to interpret it the right way. That's my
Yeah.
suggestion.
I love it because, sometimes those voices, if you think about it, they might be far and few, but they are very, very loud. And we can't let that dictate our decisions just because they're loud or even potentially hurtful or all these other factors that are at play. And when you have you have other information, data, whatever it may be, it will allow us to, make better and clearer decisions, because the more we know, the better we can decide on these
Mm.
things. And I love what you were saying about your former boss too, is that, people want the wall removed. Don't remove the wall. Just give them a ladder.
Mm.
And I mean, it's just so simple, but so smart in a way to what are other ways to overcome obstacles. Because let's face it, let's say removing that wall takes so much time, effort, resources, and everything else. And then what could happen? Well, far worse than the player saying, remove the wall. So,
Exactly.
so many great things there. And, as we're talking about all these, ideas and concepts around monetization, I mean, and I know we mentioned this in some capacities, but it's not all about the initial launch. It really isn't. I mean, I think this might be a little bit more applicable for, your straight up premium games and stuff. But in general, I mean, what would you say some ways, or what are some ways that developers can continue to refine and optimize their strategies over the lifespan, I would say, of a game or even multiple games? Because I know this is somewhat of a iterative process, but it's all something we should be mindful of. We can't just set it and forget it, so to speak. So, what are some ongoing strategies to optimize and improve our monetization?
Right. So all that games as a service direction, most of that is there to stay. It's just like that. The premium model, and to a big degree, I hate to say that because I love my classic premium games, but the premium model doesn't work the same way like in the past anymore. It's getting more and more difficult unless you have some really, really unique type of games. But if you make really expensive AAA type of games, then this would be a huge risk. So you wouldn't necessarily do that. And this is why we see so many more innovative indie games popping up that are really, really successful, while the big AAA games keep doing the same thing over and over and over again. They're missing out on all that innovation because it's too risky. The indie games can do that. They are being sold these days. So, and if you still want to aim for like really, really big numbers in revenue, then you got to understand service game methodologies properly. You have to understand user engagement, the motivation factors I talked about, and how to apply these to your game features. And you have to understand how to build that construct that allows you, that money sponge that allows you to monetize more and more and more. And it's a lot about, you already said it, an iterative approach and scaling up step by step by step. Having a small product first. Let's take the example of Concord. Don't make it $40 for an MVP, minimum viable product, which was probably their death sentence eventually. They had the wrong business model there. They had these, it's actually not such a bad game, not at all. It's just not a $40 type of game because you can play so many games for free there, which are much more than this, right? If they, however, try to release it for free with some monetization features that make sense, if they understood that monetization and what is powerful monetization, they could have started that thing off. People would say like, yeah, it's nice. It's not huge yet, but it's nice. Step by step, they could have improved it. Long time before it was costing like $200 million or what that cost was, right? They could have released a much earlier version for a much cheaper price for like a free-to-play and much lower cost. And then just iteratively go into the right direction, looking at the data, listening a little bit to the feedback, making more and more money. Learning this path is really, really important. And then on top of that, always do a lot of games research because there's more and more interesting monetization features popping up, like battle passes. It's not that new anymore, but we can still innovate a lot there, and battle passes keep changing and becoming more innovative. We can think about things like the piggy bank, for example, which a lot of people don't even know about, but it's in so many games out there already, which is a very effective tool. And understanding how proper subscription modes work, in-game subscription modes. I'm not talking about the classic World of Warcraft type of subscription. I'm talking about like something like a VIP mode within the game. But understanding what you need to put in there and how you can actually sell it is really, really tricky. So you have to do games research, play a lot of games to see all the latest monetization features, and think about the whys. Why do they work? And then apply it to your game. Don't just take the feature and put it in your game. That's not going to work. You need to understand the why first, and then you can implement it in your game, or maybe even something more innovative because you understood the why. Then you can even make a feature based on the same psychology, but that looks totally different in your game. This is how you innovate these days, and this is where the focus needs to be. The strategy needs to lead you into that direction.
Yeah, folks, because that why is super important. It allows us to frame things so we can better understand the audience, so we can know the intent behind these things, so we can better understand with that why how to align the experience with these monetization. Because when we get to that point where it's completely balanced, there's no longer, or I would say at least very little friction. And when we reduce that friction, then everybody wins. So love it. Can't thank you enough there. And, Patrick, as we get, to close here, I mean, if there's one piece of advice that you'd like, our listeners today to take away about creating successful monetization strategies, like what would it be? And, how can they begin implementing this approach, even before, let's say, diving into more advanced tactics that you teach?
Keep your mind open. Don't shy away from unpopular monetization methods. I mentioned pay to win now. There's also some other things which are considered as somewhat negative, like maybe loot boxes, gacha mechanics, and these things. Don't shy away from them. Don't just say no to them from the get-go. Understand them first, understand their psychology, implement something in your game that makes sense, and that uses all that stuff, but is at the same time also fun and feels fair to your users. So that is probably the very first, most important starting point if it comes to understanding powerful monetization systems in games these days.
Yeah, love it. And, a great way to, I think, summarize that comment too is just, keep it fair. What can you do to keep it fair, but also keep that open mind? Because if you do those two things, you're probably going to set yourself on a really strong course, to, hopefully gain lots of success. I mean, that's the goal here at least. And speaking of courses, Patrick, of course, your course, wow, I use that word way too many times, is currently available. And folks, if you're interested, if you loved the topics that we discussed and you want to dive deeper, not just into those, but how to execute in your own games, I mean, the course will be available for purchase via the show notes of this episode and even the previous ones of this masterclass series. And yeah, dig in. But if you don't, that's fine too. We, Patrick and I hope that with everything that we discussed today, there is lots and lots of things that you can take away, have that open mind, and really start applying to your games. Because at the end of the day, what we care about in this whole, series was, how we can maybe guide and help you create irresistible games. And, Patrick, I can't thank you enough for dedicating so much time with us, with the listeners, and sharing these insights and everything else. It really has been an honor to have you on the show.
It's likewise. It goes both direction. I can't thank you, all of you, enough to listen so much to me. I know I talk a lot, and I really, really appreciate that you are taking your time. You're giving me your time, basically, with this. And thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's been a pleasure. Hey, everyone. Thank you for listening to another episode of Indie Game Movement. I'm Andrew Pappas, your host, and the show's producer is Mustafa Price. Show notes for this episode can be found by visiting rengenmarketing.com, the number episode of the show. Rengen Marketing is a consulting marketing company that helps indie devs with their marketing efforts. Whether you need guidance with your game's marketing strategy or could use a free marketing plan template, then please visit www.rengenmarketing.com and take action. A special thanks to Dakota Saw for Season 2's opening theme and Melissa Gellis for the new logo design. And as always, thanks for being such great listeners, and we'll see you next time on Indie Game Movement.